Welcome to the Rebel Souls podcast, where we flip the middle finger to the status quo. I'm your host, Shelley Paxton, lifelong rebel, liberator of souls, and author of Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. Settle in as we dive deep with badass leaders who are rebelling for what matters most in life, business, and the world at large. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get this revolution started. Before we begin, I want to share an offering from my soul to yours. If you've achieved traditional success only to realize that you're living someone else's dream, then this will start you on a profound journey toward becoming chief soul officer of your own life, just like I did. I'm gifting you a free chapter from my book, Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. It's called Liberating from the Shackles of Should. And if you're ready to, then visit soulbatical.com to download it for free. That's SOULBATICAL.com. Warning, side effects include intense joy and fulfillment. Hello and welcome back, my fellow rebel souls. I'm coming at you from LA. Did the road trip, did a bit of Route 66, got out here a couple days ago, set up a little podcast recording studio in my cute little sublet apartment in Playa del Rey. For those of you who are listening and not watching, I've actually got a surfboard behind me. It's part of the decor in the place, and it feels so rad and so rebel. And I guess this is sort of the West Coast version of rebel. I'm going with it. Anyway, I'm super excited to be back and loving the lineup of guests that we have for 2021. And it's more of the same, you guys. Amazing people. Like really fucking phenomenal conversations with really inspiring people who are rebelling for so many things that are going to change the freaking world we live in. So look out. And today's guest, Addison Brasil, he's a new friend. He's an old soul. If you get a copy of my newsletter, in the January newsletter, Addison was one of the three people that I talked about who became a good friend and had an incredible impact on me down at Modern Elder Academy in Baja, Mexico, back in November, which feels so long ago now, but it really wasn't. And Addison and I had an immediate connection on so many different levels. And probably one of the deepest levels is our shared passion for normalizing the conversation around mental health. And Addison is very similarly kind of purpose-driven and mission-driven. And he has an awesome background. He is an actor. He is a model. He is a conscious creator. And in probably his most important role right now, he's co-founder of Tethr, which is an app for men. It's a peer support and community app for men to connect with each other and have safe and open conversations around their own mental health and wellness and be there for each other. It's a beautifully curated community. Addison and his co-founder, Matt, are very deeply involved in the community. And I wanted to share all of that because this is a long conversation, and it is a conversation that will change your life. And it could be a conversation that saves somebody's life or saves many lives. So as you listen to this, listen for yourself, because we get deeply, first of all, Addison's story will just break your heart wide open, and you'll understand why he's so incredibly passionate about this purpose and about Tethr as a business and about normalizing this conversation. And he gives so much practical advice, great tips on how we can be peer supporters for each other, how we can have these conversations. What does that look like? And he guides us through. And honestly, I was blown away because I thought the 5 pillars he talks about for Tether and the community that they're creating are pillars for life and are pillars for us to be more human and more connected and more there for each other. So I'm going to leave it at that. This is incredible. And please share this episode. Please share this episode with the men in your life, fathers, brothers, husbands, partners, uncles, sons, friends, colleagues, anyone who, for whom, this would make a difference and could use, a support group of men to celebrate the highs and to be there together for the lows and everything in between. I absolutely love what these guys are creating, and they're early on in their journey and having incredible success. So, let's dive into the conversation with Addison. You won't be disappointed, and I'm thanking you in advance for hanging in there. You will get fully absorbed by this conversation. You will learn a lot for your own life, and please share it with at least one other person, one other man in your life. Thank you. Enjoy. Hey, Rebel Souls. I'm so excited for this conversation with my new friend who feels like an absolute old friend. Maybe it's because you're such an old soul and we had such an amazing connection down at Baja, which my community keeps hearing probably ad nauseum, keeps hearing me talk about. But welcome, Addison Brasil.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, my community also keeps hearing about Baja too much. So I'm with you there.
I know exactly. But you know what? I think the more people start going down there and they experience it, because it's definitely one of those things where it's like you can hear people talk about it all day long, but you have to be in it, right? Mm-hmm. It's totally experiential.
Yep. Magic for sure.
Yeah. Magic. That's the perfect word. Magic. So you know how I do this. I love, excuse me. I love to start with my very favorite question. What are you rebelling for?
Yeah, and you'd think because I'm a listener that I would have over-prepared for this. But as you say that, the very natural response to that is I'm rebelling for the normalizing of true story being shared. And unedited, unfiltered, which I know you love, but just of truth being shared in an effort to create community. I think that's like sort of just where I'm at right now, both creatively and work-wise and personally, just, rebelling for you to feel free enough and safe enough to share your story.
I love that. I love that. And that's pretty much what's behind this new company that you're a co-founder of, right? That's what's behind. I included you. So for people who are deep in my community, they read about you in my January newsletter because I couldn't wait to talk about all the incredible people that I met at MEA. And I shared a little bit of your story in hopes people might start to go down the rabbit hole. But I want to get way deeper into your story. And so what led you on this journey to want to, one, share your own story, and two, help others feel comfortable and safe enough to share their truth in a really vulnerable way? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to describe it is I was this classic sort of overachiever, perfectionist type growing up, and I guess I I fell into that trap sort of what it looked like, and trying to always present achievement, and as the universe does, it had a different plan for me. And when I was 19 years old in my first year of school, I lost my brother to a brain tumor after 4 years of watching him battle that, and obviously watching and sort of co-experiencing that that full on ride that a childhood cancer next who's only 2 years younger than me, but younger than me, and it was very odd to learn so much from him. But so I lost my brother, and then 3 years later, I found my dad after his suicide, and so this kind of became this second sort of disruptor in my life of just like having to look at my mental health and well-being full time. And luckily I did always have people that I could share my story with, and that was a big part of this. And in doing that, I got to travel around the world and just like really focus on my mental health and well-being, because to be honest, I just couldn't make sense of a world where before 25 I had lost essentially all the guys in my family. I mean, my brother and my dad had been gone, and there's something so you know scary and interesting and educational and heartbreaking, obviously, about losing a parent to suicide, because it just creates this whole, really option that you never really thought existed in such a real way. Like, you never really think of an exit strategy for life in that way um, until you see it. And so, long story short, is I went off on, this journey to just try to deal with my PTSD and deal with my compounded grief, and really find a way to not just like survive what I had been through, but thrive. And sort of on the cusp of getting there, I was in a very catastrophic accident here in Los Angeles that killed one of my dear friends pretty much instantly, and left me relearning to walk, and sort of just, as I say so often, operate and love and learn and be in the world. Because I mean, at this point, it was just, it was a lot. I hadn't even turned 30, these three major losses. And this one came with losing a lot of my abilities that helped create my balance. And that had always been a part of my grief processes in staying, balanced. I mean, I'm a runner. I couldn't run. I mean, I couldn't walk. I had to learn to walk. I couldn't move. I don't even know if you know this, Shelley, but I danced at a very high level growing up, and then went to school on scholarship for dance, actually. So like, even though I wasn't dancing as much anymore, or doing choreography in that world, like movement has always been such a part. And I didn't know that till it was taken away. And there's something about just being in chronic pain that's like no other challenge that I can ever really explain, because there was the trauma elements and the compounded PTSD, but just this signal of pain going from my hip into my shoulder into my head, and the concussion syndrome symptoms. Just I had never suffered like in a physical way that quality of life issue before. And I got real quiet. I got quiet. I had a really good support system, but I got real quiet. And when it got to that point, that I sort of fell into, what would be the first time in my life, despite all those challenges, a true depression, a suicidal depression, where I found myself like really at 29 years old, 30 years old, just going like quality of life questions, and luckily I did have a support system where I could share this, and I shared it with my doctors at the time. I shared it with my coach. I shared it with my mom, my sister, family members, and my close friends, saying like, I'm really considering another option here. And I don't know if that's because it has been introduced to me in such a traumatic way with my dad, that it's something, people kept saying like, do you think about suicide often? I say this, but when you find your dad after his suicide, you think about suicide about 100 times a day. And
Yeah,
it's
of
very hard to
course.
decide if that's suicidal ideation, or if that's being obsessed with suicide because, the man who brought you into this world and that you thought would always be there to protect you, that's how he came to pass. And obviously, with a lot of education and a lot of learning in the mental health space, I now say my dad died of suicide. He didn't
Mm.
commit suicide. He didn't kill himself. He didn't make this decision to no longer be here with me. That's something that happens to you. And so anyways, in finally sort of this full circle moment of dealing with my own sort of suicidal depression at the time, 32 years old, just like went back to where my mom lived out at the time on the ocean and just said, okay, here's your chance. My mom was a very young mom. And it was like, I want to better. I'm in a really bad spot and I can't achieve out of this one. I can't, think myself out of this one. I'm really stuck here. I'm really like at a crossroads of challenges and I'm tired. And there was a part of me that was scared that if I presented strength, that I would be tested again. And I knew I wasn't strong enough for another test. I was tired. And during that time, I reconnected with a friend of mine. His name's Matt Zerker, who I went to high school with in Toronto, and we weren't friends really. We just knew of each other. He was a year older than me, um, and um, and he had posted about losing a friend on Facebook actually, and I just read his post, and I was just like, he gets it. He's in he's in the mud. He gets it. So it was kind of weird, and like honestly, even 5 years ago, like I'll be honest with you, it's like I was like, I don't want him to think like I'm being weird or like hitting on him or like something. I don't know. Like, but I was just like, hey, buddy, like I saw your post and, you know, I get what you're going through. And if you'd like to talk to somebody else who's like not a therapist, not, professional at all, but just like a listener, I'd love to chat. And he did. He wanted to talk like right away kind of thing. And so we built this really cool kind of peer relationship where we were both going to the ends of the world to feel good, both dabbling and learning and sort of living in this suicidal depression. And Matt was one of the very first people. I call it the Matt moment because it was so transformational in my life and obviously the seed of why I decided to join him in the company. But when he told me without any shame that he didn't want to live anymore, but he didn't want to die.
Mm.
And I was like, whew. No one has ever said that to me. That is how I have felt for the last however many months. I'm really trying to find a way to be here, but I can't say that, that, I want to be. And it was just like having another guy, say that to me, especially someone in high school that you really like 4 years walking the same hallways. Like we never connected. We never, like it was just kind of like, nods at best and being at the same parties and whatnot. So to have this 10 years later come full circle. And he at the time quit his lucrative hedge fund job. He had a sabbatical. He really did. He went to Bali. He, got into men's groups and I was in a men's group at the time. And it was weird. And talking back and forth, we realized he was searching for the community that I had to realize that I always had. Extremely privileged and extremely lucky. I mean, I always say this, but I feel like the most well-supported person on earth. And I say that not to brag in any way, but to say, and I still got to that point where I was considering not being here. So in learning that with him, this idea of building a community and showing up to the men's mental health crisis, pre-COVID, we're talking about 75% of all suicides being male, 75% of men saying that they have stress, anxiety, or depression, but only 40% saying that they would only ask for help if they were inflicting self-harm or suicidal. So it's like
so the very end of the journey, right?
Right. When like as we know, you're in crisis. That's no longer, so that's very limited to crisis resources. So, we were like, okay, we got to close this gap. And obviously I have very personal reasons, losing my father and a number of other people to suicide in my 20s, for wanting to be a part of that. And it was just this weird thing. I had started a nonprofit organization and a charity for children with brain tumors when my brother was palliative, and he sort of was part of building that, and we built it all off. He couldn't speak at the time, his thumbs up or thumbs down, and I'd come to him and be like, how do you want to do this? Because he had showed interest in that. And so, I was sort of like, me, Shelley, it's hard to explain what I do for a living because I'm such an intentional multi-hyphenate, but I was writing, event producing, doing all these different things, real estate, because, it's my fantasy football, and I want people to do it more consciously. but doing all these different things and going, okay, so eventually I'm going to get to this point where I create a mental health charity of some sort. Like that's where it felt like it could go. And for some reason, I seem to think I'm a Kennedy with a trust fund, and I can just do charity work and somehow have the quality of life that I've always wanted. So when Matt came up with this idea for this app, I was just like, it really clicked for me because him bringing it up made me, it helped him to realize that's what he's always needed and wanted. And a lot of men identify with that. And for me, it helped me with an immense amount of gratitude to go, that's been the glue. That's why
Yes.
I've always been here. That's the community. It's like it wasn't, of course, in addition to all the professional help I received, but when I could come to someone, a safe person in my life, and be truly honest, those were the moments that saved me. I remember when I told my sister the first time I was suicidal, and she said, okay. And she did a lot of what we do now, but she said, okay. And she sat with me, and then we talked about it. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to be here, for the next 24 hours, we're going to be here, and let's just make decisions together. But there was no panic. There was no calling SWAT teams and this thing you have in your head about straight jackets and because men still carry that stigma 100%, and I always say it's actually hard to get admitted psychiatrically. It's actually difficult. I was at a point when I was suicidally depressed where I was telling multiple people on my team, I call them, because after the accident I literally had a team of doctors and physical therapists and all these things. And I was telling everyone on my team, I think I'm losing this here. I think I'm losing this here. I feel like we're in a 7-game series and it's game 7, and no one is realizing we're down 4. I don't think I'm going to come through here. And it's there's a scale and there's professionals that help you really understand where you are, suicidally. And that helped me so much. I thought it took me so long to call a crisis line during that month when I was with my mom, but there's something about being in a room with your mom and just feeling like you have to leave the room. And then when I would leave the room, and I can never tell this, it's so funny, I can talk about everything, but this specific memory, it just gets me every time. But I was sitting with my mom and I just couldn't stand to be around her, and couldn't figure out why. And then I would leave the room and I would go into my bedroom and I would close the door, and I realized that it was because I felt so guilty that even with my mom, the most loving being that I had ever known and the safest person that I knew, that when I went in that room, I couldn't pretend anymore that I didn't want to be here. And that I felt so bad that there was a chance that in my own mother's home that I would come to that end. I just, to this day, it's just, I remember laying in that bed and just thinking, you can't do that. And it's okay, but someone has to explain to her that I'm just in pain all the time. And it's so much loss, and so much of what I thought I was here to do just feels impossible. And I just, if she could, and I just remember thinking, if she could just feel my pain for an hour, she would let me go. I remember it being so logical, and everybody was worried about me all the time. And I did feel like a burden. And this is somebody who read every book on suicide after losing their father to suicide, who knows that you're never a burden, who knows that, but it got there, and it got to this scary place. And so in that moment, as things tend to happen, as something sort of beautiful was starting to grow out of that. And I was at the point where, I sort of, if you take everything I was doing, it was kind of like I was becoming this conscious consultant or concierge of sorts, where I was working with people and building ideas and having clients and doing events and trying to move everything just a little bit more consciously at the time. And I'm sort of the guy that's like, oh, I have an idea for a TV show. So you come and you tell me, and you hope that maybe I'll write it for you. So I was I had a lot of that, especially in LA. And I was so when Matt came to me with the app, I was just you know what? I just made this promise to myself. I'm doing phase 2. I love your idea, but you got to go put some skin in the game and come back with something. Cause us two non-tech people having an idea for an app that can save the world, what does that equal? Let's be serious. We needed someone in product, someone in dev. It's just not, us chatting about this on and on is expelling energy that probably should go into making making sure this exists because clearly this was Matt's passion. And, this, I have to say, this does not happen. I mean, I have said this to so many people who come to me with an idea, but Matt, called, we stayed in touch as peer supporters. And, when he called and said, okay, I have a CTO, he's building the app, and I have a head of product, he's designing the app, and the tech part's built out. And I said, okay, as promised, AddiConnect, whatever I can do to make sure this happens, I'm with you. And I just was going to be a champion. And they had the app and they had the idea and they had the very initial branding, like a website and whatever. And I realized that they needed to build a community. And that's sort of, I mean, if you look at my life, because of these diversions, who knows, maybe I, would have been on more 30 under 30 lists with how I operate in the world, or, won certain awards or whatever. If I had steered straight on that achievement path, would I have been happy? Who knows? Because I learned a lot along the way. But, if I really think about why I'm here, and if you ask me, like, what are you the most proud of? It's none of those things, really. It's the community that I've cultivated over my lifetime. I mean, it's just like, it's like, that's why I'm here. I mean, it's literally why I'm here. I love and know so many people so deeply, and they've, like, so many people have been so generous. I mean, like yourself and everybody we met in Baja, like, just to really connect and really allow their sort of true selves to come forward after that initial sort of like businessy front or whatever it is, like the LA shtick, whatever it is. Like, I seem to have this sort of key that makes people, feel safe. And when we started to build Tethr, I had to really spend a lot of time thinking about that and what was that. And it was the same as all the research was showing for men in mental health, is if you create a safe space, if you model behavior, it's reciprocated. If I share with you what I've been through, if I tell you that, like, I like I'm presenting all of this on Instagram, but hey, here's the deal, And the more I did that, the more I tapped into what was really happening. And I had a real challenge of it because I was like, modeling and acting in LA, and you were expected to put up this front of, this good looking life in every way imaginable.
Yeah, the
and then
Instagram
here I am,
front,
like,
right?
yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. And so it was like something I could really look at and like, well, what would a safe space really look like? And so I started it like with a meeting with Matt, and then it was a day of the week, and then it was 5 days of the week, and then it was like quite clearly I was going to join them as a co-founder and build the brand and make sure that the impact driven community was created. And I have, this was a COVID pivot. I was at my family's cottage on the lake and going, what am I going to do? I mean, everything I did, everything I fed off both socially and personally, and I just like found a way to not die, and then, so I was sort of in this isolation, especially emotionally, but with my accident, I was also like physically in one place. So I did this whole recovery, and got through it. I don't, it's a miracle. It's mindset. It's finally getting the right people working with me in my body. But I went from 95% suicidal pain to it doesn't affect my daily life right now. It's and I am like beyond so grateful. And if anyone listening to this is dealing with chronic pain, like, I just take a moment to honor you, because I just know that signal is just, it takes a very strong person, and you really do have to have a community around that. But yeah, like, I lived in this sort of isolation. So in some ways you could say, like, the benefit of that is I was sort of more prepared than others for this lockdown because I felt like I'd been locked down. But then on the other end, I felt like I was finally about to pick things up, and the world locked down. And I know how that feels too.
Oh yeah.
With when your book
Completely.
came out, it was like, I'm ready to go. And they were like, building these connections. And every time I went out, I was making a meaningful connection because I was finally showing up as myself. And then it was like, no more going out, going to the cottage for I think we did initially like 17 weeks straight where I didn't see anyone but who I was quarantining with. And that's when Tethr was really starting to be built. And it was just like, I'm very fortunate that my COVID pivot has become, I was just saying this to our friend Jeremy on the phone, like, I can't figure it out, but I just fucking love my job. I
Mm.
just love my job. And I just like everything, like every part of it, because it's all driven around like making this impact. And I
It's
get to see
purpose
because I'm a part of the
driven.
community. Yeah.
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 Well, it's purpose
Yeah.
driven, and it's part of your story. And what you're doing is saying, I've been through this. You're sharing your story so openly, so vulnerably, and you're helping others to connect. I love you. I wrote down this term that you used. You said you and Matt were peer supporters. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't
Mm-hmm.
heard it expressed that way, but I want to, can we dive into that a little bit? Because I'm
Yeah.
guessing that's
Yeah.
part of what the community of Tether is built on. What does it mean
Yep.
to be a peer supporter, and what does that look like? Like, how can more of us be peer supporters? Because I feel like we live in a world that is so disconnected right now. And then you layer COVID on top of that. So, how do more of us create the community that we need to thrive?
Yeah. Gosh. Okay. Such a great question. And yeah, okay. So peer supporter, first off, is like obviously you have, so many people with coaching certifications, and there's so many ways to approach a well-being journey. And so what Matt and I have set out to do, like the way we met with each other, and I always like to just put it out there that like the tech side of our team, obviously the app doesn't exist without them. So the unsung heroes, Burke White and Denny Park, who built this thing that we sort of are spokespeople and use our story to attract more people. But we kind of, the four of us have this sort of pact about being peer supporters to the highest possible level. So without ever getting a coaching certification, without ever, obviously, like I thought about going back to school and becoming a psychologist. I mean, we have these thoughts, right? Especially when we're trying to save ourselves, we think about saving other people. And I
Yeah.
think even my interest in wanting to be a coach during that very challenging time after the accident definitely was born of that. But then there's something for me and Matt, there's something more about taking this to the highest possible level without stepping out of the community ourselves. So peer support, I think the most important thing to think about when you think about peer support is that it's the intention to show up fully and to assist somebody else or to be assisted. And it's a balanced, meaning that at any point you become the supporter or the one getting supported.
Mm.
That balance is so important, because if we become fixers rather than, you know, co-supporters where we're both helping each other on our journey, that's a very different relationship. And the reason I say boundary driven is what we're realizing is a lot of being a peer supporter, we think, okay, I just need to show up for this person. I just need to fix this. I just need to be there for this person. And what we really encourage all the guys to do is to stop, take a deep breath,
Mm.
do your one word check in, and ask, am I in a place to support somebody else right now? And if the answer is no, celebrate that awareness. No. And the next step on that little diagram, when it's like, yes, go this way, no, it goes this way.
Right.
If it's no, letting them know, hey, this is where I'm at right now, but I'm sure that we can find someone together that can support you, in the way that you need. And so those boundaries, it's like we think about a lot of the time, boundaries being about putting on someone else. I'm putting this boundary on you, but boundaries are really for us, right? So it's,
A
and to
hundred
protect us, and because,
percent.
right. And if it's not there to kind of protect the beautiful ecosystem that peer support can be, then nobody's helping anybody. We're just sort of taking on each other's stress and feeling worse that we're not fixing them. So that's the other thing, is create the boundary in your head, create that switch in your head. And this is your friends, your family, whoever. And you can even verbally say it. And a lot of people are like, really? I'm like, yes. Hey, just so you know, state it. I'm showing up to you as a peer right now. I want to be here for you as fully as possible. I'm not approaching this in any effort to fix you. I don't expect
Mm.
you to be fixed by the end of this conversation, but I will honor the fuck out of this journey with you. Let's talk. And then we kind of go into, we've started to build, and this is sort of like a keynote talk that we get to do, and we've started to build as this, like the peer support guys, is these 5 pillars of peer support. And I think that these pillars, for me, they just are a constant reminder. And so much of it happens just in the way you set up the safe space. And that's what they're there to do. So the first one is just acknowledgement. Like, start with acknowledgement. If you have the privilege in this day and age of being, in a room with someone, of course, that can just be eye contact and body language and the way you show up, letting them know, like, you're safe, you're open, and you're listening. And just say, I hear you, and I'm here to listen, and letting them know that they're safe. And then that kind of segues right into the second one, which is active and empathetic listening. And this is so important, as we know. And I know you talked about this down in Baja as well, but to be truly actively listening is a skill. And it's a skill we have lost. It's a lost art.
It's something we're not taught. Think about it. If active and empathetic listening was taught from kindergarten onwards, we would live in a very different society than we do today.
We would. And so much support right now. I mean, you've seen it. I know I've seen it. I know I've done it. And I continue to learn every day. But someone shares something with you and you say, oh, yeah, I know all about that because. And then you talk about how you know about when your heart was broken, or how you know about, and it's instantly, the safe space is instantly switched, and it's like, whereas with active and empathetic listening, you're really there. And like, I come from the acting world, and I think, like, I went all the way through the Groundlings, which is like, you get to a point where you're improvising a whole show based off one word, and let me tell you, there is no way to be a successful actor or be a successful improviser without listening, because it's just like, it literally kills the scene, and it literally kills people. They need to be heard, and it's just these correlations. It's so weird. Like, if you told me the Groundlings and Tether, like, this was all amounting.
Oh my God. And
my resume,
Totally. Well, and you read this in my book too, right? I was like, who knew that studying at Second City and learning the basics of improvisation, listening, yes, and, full on present, being present and collaboration. These are life skills that I had no idea. And I love that you're seeing that as well. I tell everybody I can, I'm like, just go take an improv class. It will help you in life and ways you can't imagine.
And also, like, that skill of, I could go on forever about this, but that skill about how I use my improv skills just for real life, but the skill of realizing you cannot prepare for improv. You are going to get one word, and the only thing that's then going to help you is to follow the guidelines, which, like you said, listening, yes, and not negating or shutting other people down, showing interest. So it's like, it's so interesting, but it's like, these are the basics of how to have a meaningful conversation, and learning that, like, you see it. It's like somebody makes like shut someone down and thinks it's funny, and the audience is crickets in an improv show. It's just like, because like, we want to go with it. We want to be a part of it. And it's like, nobody wants to watch two people fight. You know what I mean? Or not.
It's a momentum and energy killer. Yeah.
Right. It is. Well, and it's like, it's so for real life too, It
is. Well, what was really powerful just on this, before you go through the other three, what really struck me is when you were telling the story, part of your story earlier, when you said you admitted to your sister that you were having these suicidal thoughts, and she simply listened. And I'm getting goosebumps again. I had goosebumps as you were telling that story, and it makes me feel really emotional, because how many times, I can imagine many times where people have been like, oh, you're okay. It's all fine. The world, the world's still spinning. Be grateful for X, Y, and Z. And it's like, that's not what you need in the moment. And it just really struck me. I took a note on that because I wanted to come back to the power of listening, and you beautifully brought us there. But we cannot overstate how important this is in our lives, in our relationships, in our connection. Whew. It makes me really emotional talking about it,
my
actually.
Sister, like, she didn't run a peer support app. So, it was, my sister and I are like twins. And that it's such a cool thing because we actually have this relationship where we don't finish sentences and we don't like, we just know, so I mean, and it's so interesting that you said that because being so in tune with where I was at, she knew before I said anything that it was not good. I mean, she had flown in from Australia. So, I mean, I got the
Whew.
idea,
Yeah.
So she was there with me and we went actually to this hotel in in San Diego, in La Jolla. And, we went and we went for 5 days and it was like, that was sort of, like a retreat, like a sabbatical. And we were just going to take it slow. And she knew in that moment that she just intuition knew that if she tried to fix it, if she tried to convince me otherwise, if she did anything other than honor my journey and let me be the expert of my experience, that it was not going to go well. And so she just kept listening. And then, she's like, and then finally after hours, she said, okay, so I totally understand everything you're saying. And, she used my own words, which we'll get into. And, I learned so much of this experientially from her doing this. And then it was like, for instance, one of the things that really stressed me out is obviously, the money aspect of things when you're after the accident. And, she just so brilliantly started to separate the things that were going to be sort of a long-term spiritual and mental well-being journey and the things that she knew she could help with right now. And she has like 5 finance degrees and like, it was just, and she, she just so lovingly pointed me towards what was actionable, and what she could help with, and what she truly understood and fully, like of course she did not want me not here, but she would not pretend that she didn't get where I was at, and that was very hard for my family because they're just kind of like, even with the loss of my dad, I was the one who found him, so it was a totally different thing for me than everybody else in that way. And it was sort of this weird thing of being the only man versus like all the girls stayed in the family, 2 sisters and my mom. So it's this weird thing. But anyway, I just wanted to say, it's what I'm saying is that it's in there if you trust that intuition of what somebody really needs. And just like a quick cheat, it's usually not to hear about how about their experience. It's just usually not.
Yeah. And what you said, I love the phrase like, honor that person's journey. And I introduced you to Houston Kraft, and I think you guys had a conversation, and he defines, when he talks about what deep kindness means, he defines empathy, and he's like, empathy is standing in the rain together. You don't have to know exactly what that person is experiencing. You may never have been on that journey in your entire life. It is literally standing and getting fucking wet together with that human. And there's something so powerful in that. So I tied that to your active and empathetic listening, because we don't have to have been on the journey. I think we often shy away from things where it's like, oh shit, well, I've never had suicidal thoughts. I've never experienced the loss of a father. I've never, XYZ. And the reality is that's not a requirement.
No. And I love the rain idea because you don't have to talk about the rain. You don't have to figure out the rain. You don't have to, you just be in the rain. And you get the simple part of being in the experience with somebody else and sitting with them. I mean, we call it in my family, it's like weird, we call it pocket pal, where we like our friends, like they would come over for hours at a time. And like our house was that house that you could just walk into and it was always unlocked. And it's kind of like this idea of like, you can just be together and spend time together and be in the experience of it. And we had to do that. I mean, because we were grieving on such a high level. I mean, like people were constantly coming over, and you cannot, after traumatic losses, and I can speak from experience with 3 of them, you cannot go into it with everybody. You cannot seek to be understood, especially on a daily basis. You just end up exhausted. It's like doing a press tour of grief. It's just, it's not, it's not sustainable, and that's a big word they learned. So I know that we could totally go there. So acknowledgement and active listening are obviously something that, you introduced very quickly in the conversation. And from that active listening, the third pillar is to ask questions. And the thing about asking questions is that you want to use the person who's sharing's words. You
Mm,
want to use their language. So, this is, I use this classic example, but it's like, I've I've called people before and said, like, this is it, like, so and so just will not let me succeed here, like, I quit, I give up, like, we've all had that phone call once or twice before, and they say, oh yeah, I get it, and they sort of egg you on or whatever, and you leave and you're like, kind of like, So I had a masterful coach that I think I told you the story, Shelley, that I met magically on a plane during all of that. And Jennifer Merrifield is her name. And she is just so brilliant, out of Toronto. And she was one of the first people to do this to me. And I don't know, everybody in some ways too, this is where the boundaries come in. Everybody kind of let me be the expert too much, like where they
mm.
weren't using my own language and holding me accountable to what I was actually saying. And so the first time, so it's like the same kind of thing goes, and they go, I'm so sorry to hear that you can't do this and that you won't succeed and that you're giving up. Do you want help writing your resignation letter? And it's
Ooh.
like, I'm not giving up. What are you talking about? I've never given up anything in my life. I'm gonna, and it's
And
like
then
you
the
just
achiever comes to
did.
life again.
Yeah, and it's like all you did was, instead of paraphrasing it and sort of like adding gasoline to the fire under the guise of fixing and understanding, all you did was respond to me with my own language so that I had to then show up to my own experience, or at least how I was telling the story. And
Because we
it's
don't
like, give up.
often
I'm not giving up.
hear. Yeah, it's like I
Yeah.
talk about in the book about the shoulds, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
another example
Mm-hmm.
of we don't hear oftentimes what we're actually saying, and language matters. So to be able to call that out, and not in a shaming or judging way, but simply call it out. You're right. We need help. That's beautiful reflection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, like, if somebody says, the other thing is too that I realized in this time, especially when I was doing so much coaching, because I felt like I was misunderstood all the time, and my coach would always say, okay, well, we teach people how to treat us, so let's talk about your part in that. And that's been such a big part of, honestly, my happiness, like, just
Yes.
bringing it over to me. It sounds like a lot on you, but then it's like very, very freeing. And it's like, you have to start asking questions like, okay, I'm assuming when someone says to me, I can't go on anymore, I'm putting that into my brain and my experience and what that means to me. That's dangerous. Shelley, what does I can't go on anymore mean to you? Because it just might mean that you're done for the day and you're going to order a pizza, and that's that. You know what I mean? Like, or what
Yeah.
does, like, heartbroken mean to you? Because my experience of heartbroken isn't really serving you in this moment. And if I'm really showing up to support you, I need to ask more questions, and based on your language. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And one thing that we've learned that really is effective is focusing on how come questions versus why.
Yeah.
Why triggers the story. A victim mentality is very easy to come out of why. They can intellectually explain to you why they got to this point, and you can guess that it involves a lot of other people making them feel a certain way. But also, if you ask how come, how come you're feeling this way, and then it's about their experience, and you ask how does that feel literally in your body right now, and it's like, so it allows processing rather than reiterating a story that is not serving anyone. I leave feeling like I didn't help you, you leave just with a reiterated victim story, and it's like, it's just these little simple language swaps. And I know you're such a geek like I am with all these things, because
Oh
I
yeah.
love the power of language.
And the
But
power of
yeah.
mindset, because
Mhm.
language is mindset. If
Yes.
you tell
Yeah.
yourself you can't, then you can't.
Yeah.
If you
It's
tell
true.
yourself you
It's so
can, you
true.
can.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
so much of that, it's such a practice for such a long time, and it seems silly and it seems hokey, but even just, we've talked about this, obviously, we both are obsessed with what should and get to and need and get to and have to and get to. And me going through seeing the death of so many people, and I mean that quite literally. Like I saw the death, like I saw death, and like was like I was forced to deal with the finality of that. And in like this experience, what I've realized though is that I'm actually not that isolated. I just have the most tangible finality in my experiences. These people have been lost and they're not coming back. And in a way, I have a hard wall that I can push off against and find, a way to go. People, I realized everyone around me was grieving. They just weren't getting the license to call it that. What you thought your 20s were going to be, what you thought your degree was supposed to be, who you thought your first love was going to be. I mean, we're all grieving and we're all in these grief processes all the time. And I actually was, in a way, in a mental health way, privileged to have sort of public trauma that everyone sort of understood on some sort of level that I would be grieving, because it got to be honored in a very different way. We're not prone to honor the journey of, the relative grieving that's happening all the time. I mean, we're all grieving right now. This is not what we planned. I mean, to be locked in and confused and, all the things that are happening. It's like so many people, they can't put words around it, and they think grief is just surrounded around a physical death of someone you knew or a loved one. But grief is just coming, honoring the relationship with what you thought something going to be, the plan that you had versus what was going to happen.
And there's
and I realize that, and I want to commend people that they've grieved so much too.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's like we tell ourselves a story, like we don't give ourselves permission to grieve all of the losses. Grieve like there's human loss, there's job loss, there's financial loss, there's heartbreak loss, there's all of the things you mentioned, a lot of them. And there's just even loss of the way things used to be, the loss of hugging right now. Like there's grief involved. So giving ourselves permission. I don't know. Do you guys use that language and talk about that in your communities?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And my tagline, like, I think we're all getting to the point where we know my book is going to be called Honor the Journey. But, like, cause I use it so often, but it's also because that was born out of condolences doing absolutely nothing for me. I always felt like condolences were for other people, and they put something on me that I didn't want or like, or what their and I know everybody, obviously, like from a mindset perspective, I know everybody was, doing what you do. But for me, it's like, okay, well, if that really bothered you, then don't say sorry for your loss, or, don't say those things that were said to you. And so that's why when people come to me and they say, like, you've dealt with so much death, I just don't know how to support this friend. And I always say, first of all, I have no idea how to help you, because every grief process is so specific and so authentic to the relationship. I mean, it's and how that person operates in the world and how they deal with loss, and that's why it sounds kind of blanket, but it's also so specific to say, honor the journey. And don't be afraid to tell people that, like, I laughed hysterically, both limo rides to the churches of both my brother and my father's funeral. I mean, to a point where my ex-girlfriend that was in the limo and the one time was like, you guys are terrible. Like, it's just some like HBO, comedy drama shit, but it's like, that's what happens. And, people would see me and my sister and they thought we were, and trust me, I also did enough crying for everybody. But, at times people think we're hyperventilating, and we were laughing so hard because it was so far from reality of anything we ever thought, that we were literally hysterically laughing, and that was judged. I mean, we come from a Portuguese Catholic family. I mean, that was just like something you shouldn't be doing. There's that should, and it's like, no, I just found my dad after his suicide 3 years after losing my brother to cancer. I get to laugh, cry, kick, scream, honor it. And this is where I think it's so cool that we're having this conversation, because sometimes when we do these talks, we skip to, well, it's a mindset. But you have to, like you said, give yourself permission, process and honor the journey first. You don't skip that. No. That's not a thing you skip. And then mindset around it. I can now play what I call the benefit game with the deaths and losses of my life. I can now see how, in a world where I cannot change someone else's life curriculum or when they're going to leave the earth, if we put that aside and we put its own corner, and then we look at how this has benefited me, how I have learned more as a person, I can do that from a mindset point of view. But whenever someone tried to put that on me while I was still in a deep grief, because grief doesn't go anywhere, and I never want to perpetuate that. You just build on and honor the relationship on a daily basis with the loss. But whenever somebody would be like, everything happens for a reason, I almost went to jail for murder.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, so the reason that I get to be successful in LA, my brother literally gives his life. Like, no. And I'm a highly intellectual debater. So it's like, you do not it's a never for me, but for someone else. And my dad and my brother, obviously just so protective of that. I'm like, so let me get this straight. I'm going to write an award-winning movie so they died so that, and I just would get so mad. So it's like, I always say this, like, you have to, like you said, give yourself permission. And yes, we set an allotted time. Everybody kind of is like, what? But it's like, set an allotted time, I am going to feel this angry. And I do it. I literally set an alarm. And it's something my coach helped me learn. Like, you know what? I am not having today. The pity party begins now. It ends at 9 p.m. when my alarm goes off, and I am going to switch back into, ride the scale from my victim mentality into more of a survivor mentality, and hopefully get to thriver by the end of the night. But I'm going to honor the shit for the next 2 hours, or I'm going to cry my fucking eyes out until the tears stop, and then we're going to continue. But it's like, giving yourself permission to do that and realizing that, like, it's processing, it's effective. It's why we pay therapists and coaches to help us facilitate that
It's
unlocking
so
to
true.
process,
I love this.
It's
I'm
there.
struggling to remember who the woman was, but I heard this woman tell a powerful story about her own journey with stage 4 cancer. And the interviewer was asking her, like, well, how do you wake up and deal with like that hanging over you every day? And she said, I gave myself exactly 20 minutes every morning to have a pity party. And when that alarm went off, I went, okay, whether I cried, I laughed, I curled up in a ball, under the covers, whatever I needed to do for those 20 minutes, I honored that. And I gave myself permission. And she said the interesting thing is that as she went on, she really only took about 5 of the minutes. And some mornings she was like, I don't really want to have a pity party because I'm kind of like, I'm doing well. And I just think there's so many, we can apply that to so many different things in our lives. We don't have to have a terminal illness. We don't have to have loss. But you know what? If you want to have a pity party, give yourself permission to have a pity party, but put a time limit on it, like you just said. It's beautiful.
Yeah, be protective of your power. I mean, if it goes into weeks of you saying, I used to do this, Shelley. I mean, like, I would call people and be like, because it was part of my shtick. I mean, also, like, it's hard because, a writer and a performer and whatever, but it's like, okay, you ready for the Addison of the week? Like, of course, I got rear-ended while trying to help the children at the children's hospital. Like, it was that sort of narrative. Like, it's just like, and I would laugh hysterically. I would laugh. Like, it wasn't like I was, the world's against me, but I was. And I had to come to terms with that, even if I put humor around it, that I was still perpetuating and not protecting. It's like, well, how did you really feel about getting sideswiped on your way at 5 a.m. to volunteer at the children's hospital to usher terminal ill patients? It's like, okay, yeah, you know what? I need 20 minutes because that kind of pisses me off. And like, like that happened. And it's like, when I started to do that, where it's like, be careful. And I just started to be more protective of my power. I don't need to tell 10 people about every time a bird shits on me. I don't need to. There's other things that I can do. And if that's what we're talking about, I'd rather listen. I'd rather learn. I'd rather, what would serve me more in it? It's like, it's so important to just, really honor that. And like that woman you spoke of, I found that too, that the more that it's become, the more that I know inherently that I would honor that I will have the pity party, there's less need for it to happen because I know I'm allowed if I need it, Yeah, if I want it, I get to.
I get
You
to.
can't even, yeah, I
I
get
tell
you.
my
It's like,
clients the
ooh.
same thing. I say, so my clients who are worriers, so this works for so many things that
Mhm,
suck our energy. And so clients who are worriers, it's like, great, put a little worry appointment on your calendar for 20 minutes or half an hour. Worry the shit out of everything and then let it go.
mhm,
So we can use this in so many
mhm,
different ways that just start to just stop that loop that can
mhm.
honestly just drains all of our creative energy.
Yeah. And yeah, the mental thinking you are mentally preparing by running every possible scenario until you're
Yeah,
exhausted so that by the time you're at the opportunity, you're so exhausted you can't show up fully. It's just,
exactly.
yeah, you get to a point where we talk about this all the time, Matt and I, when we have our founders talks, it's like we're getting to this point, and in our journeys, we got to a point where we were too smart to be dumb.
Mm,
When you get to a point where you go, this actually just isn't going to serve me, like this just actually is not helpful at all to go into this victim mode for the next 3 days about something like this. It's just, it doesn't, I can't take it to court. I can't prove it. I'm not going to get an indictment on me being the, the most under whatever in the world. Like, it's just like, and I really do think like that. And I love also what you said about, because my sense of humor has to be a part of everything because it's me. And, I want to normalize mental health conversation, but as I said in the beginning, authentically as who you are. And so my
yeah.
humor is such a big part of that. And when my coach went through this with me, the way that, this might be helpful for some people, the way that I thought about it is both understanding when other people were sort of stuck in a victim mindset, but also when I would get to that point, is I think about it a lot like a baby. We don't expect right away the baby to be able to go to the bathroom, obviously, or feed itself, or know why it's crying or any of those reasons. And it sort of is this light way of like having fun with myself, whereas, oh, the baby needs a diaper change. And that's how I think about myself when I was starting to get, in that place. Or, it's like, I joke, but it's just like, my friends who know about this and my friends who are sort of in that more conscious community with me, it's like, oh, how was your day? And all I have to say is, oh, a lot of babysitting. And they're like, oh, you or other people. And it's like, oh, the baby, it's just like, I can't believe how much this baby needs this diaper change. Like, it's just like, we know how it works. They know what the potty is, but like, and you have to, because you would never blame a baby in that
Yeah.
learning process, and it's just, for me, it just works, and it allows me to approach it like with a little bit of humor. And it's like with myself where I'm like, I feel myself starting to unravel, and I'm like, oh, okay, what is the, and awesome, like, just for me, I get hangry, and it reminds me too, like, has the baby eaten?
Mm,
Literally, maybe that's why the baby's crying, like, to go back to those
yeah.
those things that a baby needs, the nourishment, the nurturing that has to exist to feel well-being.
Oh my God.
It's like, I
What
love that.
I love this whole example because yes, it's authentic and it's a really gentle way to be with ourselves. Because I
Mhm.
think, if we get hangry or whatever happens, we're feeling that sort of victimness. We're feeling like things are unraveling. We tend to berate ourselves. So
Mhm.
instead of berating ourselves, you're going, oh, I'm going to laugh at this because now I get it. I get it.
Mhm.
It's the baby and the baby. It's such a cool way to be authentic. And of course, it's going to be humor for you. It may not be humor for everyone. It's definitely humor for me
Right.
too. And it's also a gentle way. Instead of beating the shit out of ourselves, which we're so good at doing, it's just a gentle reminder going, oh, right. That's what it is. Let's
Mhm.
just call it out. And then you can course correct.
And
But being
it's a
gentle with
beautiful,
ourselves,
like,
yeah.
yeah. A beautiful, I was just going to say, because I'm sure the people who listen to your podcast and have read your book, they're probably on some sort of journey, and you
Mm,
start to notice sort of when your mindset starts to shift versus those around you. Obviously, that's a big thing, and I know we've talked about this before, and I won't go into it, but the two lonelies, the lonely that
yeah.
inspires change, and then the lonely once you've started to make change, and you want more people that are on that wavelength and looking at life in that way, and there's that second loneliness. Um, and I feel like it's also such a beautiful way to not judge but discern when you're in those
Yeah.
conversations where you're going, okay, this person is, really having a hard time with their victim mentality right now, like, the world is against them, and you just lovingly kind of nod and do, and we will get back to those pillars, guys. We will get back to them because
yes,
this goes
4
there.
and 5,
but
exactly.
you do that active listening, and you do that active and empathetic listening, and you start to ask questions using their language, but the whole time you go, oh, the baby, like as soon as someone goes into that mode now, in my head I go, oh, the baby needs their diaper changed, and they're this lovable baby, and it makes me laugh rather than go, oh, I can't listen to this, and sort of like get like, you can get defensive, and it doesn't serve anyone, right? Because that's not how they're going to respond. But as we know, if we use their own language and help them to process, you're both going to get somewhere that serves everybody. But you have to do it from that place of discernment. You get to do it from that place of discernment. That's the thing about neural pathways, guys. Once you start, it's like every time you have to correct it. Like it's like it becomes this thing. But you get to do it from a place of discernment and a place of love, where you go, oh, the baby needs their diaper changed, or I mean, if you're like me, I take it so far where in my head, if that's not working, if that dulls down, it's like, oh, do they need to be burped? And I picture myself burping an adult, because it's just so loving, and it's like, that's okay. Until you
let
learn
it out.
Let's burp it out. This is no, because that's it with emotional intelligence. It's just like that. And like you said, if we learn this from day one, obviously we would all be able to just, like we're potty trained and like we learn to burp and all these things, but we have to lovingly look at that, like everyone's on that journey. So that's a big part of it. And I'm glad that somehow magically, as it always does, this brings us back to the pillars.
Well done.
So we had acknowledgement and we have active listening, which obviously leads into asking questions. And we talked about those types of questions. And so the next one kind of splits. 4 and 5 kind of split, and you can do this in an order that you're more comfortable with. But it's very important that as a peer supporter, that you make sure you realize, depending on, and all these things work for celebrating too. These work for positive conversations too. And that's always a very good test when you're asking questions, when you're acknowledging the way you're speaking. Would this work if this person was in joy? You wouldn't be investigating their joy. You wouldn't be trying to fix their joy. You'd be honoring it with them, and same with joy. Help them anchor it, because we spend so much time anchoring sadness and pain with people. That's like when someone tells you they're having a really good day. Oh, cool, Shelley. What does that feel like in your body right now? Nice. And like, even just saying that, and we're faking it, I just felt, from you
too.
what that
I
would
literally,
feel like.
my smile got so big. Yeah, exactly.
I love that you're feeling that, and we're not even really, so it's like doing that. I just want to say, this isn't for, peer support is not for when you're in crisis. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway, and that kind of leads us into the next. For yourself as a peer supporter, make sure to assess if you believe someone is in crisis. And the thing that, I've spent a lot of time talking to crisis resources and doing my own research as a peer, and seeing, what they had to say. And crisis, I've been advised by many crisis counselors, which I am not, that it is perfectly acceptable and very smart for both parties to just simply ask, do you feel like you are in crisis? Do you feel that you are a danger to yourself? So a lot of people don't want to ask that question because it seems like, but it's like, I need to know, because once again, as per my boundaries, I'm only a peer supporter. So if you need crisis resources, if we need like to help, and it's like peer support, the best way to put it, and when you're thinking about it in your head, is I am here for you before, during, and after whatever you need to do to get through, process, celebrate, be a part of this moment. And so if your friend broke their arm and clearly needed nerve surgery, you wouldn't get down, find the things that are in your car, and start doing that surgery. Like, even if your friend was like, no, you do it. No, you do it. It's like, no, I'm going to comfort you. I'm going to listen. I'm going to see. I'm going to call emergency services.
I will drive you there.
Yes,
but I will not drive do the surgery.
There. I will wait outside if it's not COVID. Outside the room. I will be at your bed. But I will do everything outside of what is someone who's crisis certified or a doctor to handle. And like to the point that I have offered myself to be, I will be on speakerphone when you call the crisis line. I will literally do the call with you, but I cannot be the crisis counselor in this moment. And doing it that way, letting them decide, and this is to open up. This is not for us to necessarily do, but just so you know, everyone has this kind of idea of what crisis support is like. And they do the same thing on a higher level that they're trained to do, where, if you say, I'm going to end my life tonight, they don't tell you why you shouldn't. They say, I'm really sorry to hear that you won't be here tomorrow. Because they want you to acknowledge and what you're saying in your experience, and make sure that that's really where you're at, and to say, it's really sad. Like I can see how, it's going to be devastating to have to plan your funeral this weekend for your mother. Like I just, and I believe you. I am not discrediting your experience. You are the expert of your experience. And if you tell me that you are suicidal, then you absolutely are. And we can together find you the crisis resources that you need, and you go back to those boundaries, and the boundaries and the balance are there to make sure that the entire relationship remains sustainable, So yeah, assessing if it's a no. I mean, if it's just like, I've known Shelley for a while and she, I just know that's not where we're at. You always can still ask if you need clarity at all, ask. If in doubt, just ask. But if it's just a normal situation, it's like you skip step 4 and can go to step 5, which, Shelley, I'm a human being, and I am like, what is step 5? What is the 5th pillar?
I love it.
That's question. I'm like, whoa.
What the fuck is step 5? That's right.
I'm gonna find out real quick.
It'll come to you. Exactly. I was gonna say you've got resources. You've got resources there. I mean, this is while you're looking. Well, you know what? It is what it is. We're all human. I love that you. I mean, talk about like being vulnerable and transparent and authentic. You just demonstrated it again.
It's so funny because like you wouldn't think this, but I will celebrate this moment, because as a perfectionist in the past, I would be like, I can't believe. I mean, this would be a 3-day waste of time about how I forgot something like this. And it's the simplest one. It's the simplest one. So and this can go before, 4 or after 5, because sometimes assessing if someone's in crisis can be fed by this question. But before you decide, so and like I said at the beginning, these pillars are all happening very quickly. You can imagine as someone starts talking, you're acknowledging them. You're actively listening. You begin to ask questions when it's appropriate and there's space for you to do so, and they've invited you to. But asking, and people always forget to do this, and I literally forgot the pillar, but is asking, it's become so inherent. What does support look like for you right now?
Oh, I love this question.
So important, because if they don't want advice, then they don't want advice. And the person is then able to say, I'm looking for advice around this, but I really would just like someone to listen and hear me on this. Do you have a shared common experience? That's something that they can let you know that they would like. So we're not like, we don't have to be guessing, because it is a weird thing on how to support each other. And it's like, it's like so weird how it's so simple. Asking, are you in crisis? Getting an answer, and then asking, what does support look like for you right now? And that also comes back to boundaries and knowing whether or not from your check-in, if you can fully show up right now. If they say, I want to do my life story for the next 3 hours, and you've got a meeting, like, you have to be in a position to say, okay, that's amazing. I love that you're asking for that right now. This is what I can do. We can either do some safety planning and talk later when I can do this, or let's find you another guy that can chat right now, because it's not specific to me, because really all I'm doing is being, a safe space, which makes it possible for everyone to peer support anyone if they follow these steps. And that's
honestly, I just want to highlight this question again, because asking this simple question in everyday life, thinking about like us as humans in this world, seeking deeper connections. What if we simply ask this question more often? What does support look like for you right now? Think about how many conversations we have per day where it's like somebody might be freaking out about something, or something, something just shitty happened in their life or whatever. And so often they just want to be heard. They just
Mhm.
want somebody who will listen. And it might only be for 5 minutes, but we are, to the earlier point you made, I think so often it's like, how can I fix it? How can I fix it? How can I make it better? How can I make it go away? And it's like, no, don't just put all of that aside and say, what does support look like for you right now? How beautiful. Let's all use that more often.
For sure. And again, another opportunity for everyone just to have a better feeling experience, because it also is dispelling any subconscious expectation. You know, we might not want our friend to fix us, but when subconsciously that is sort of our expectation. But when someone asks us, like, what does the support look like for you right now? How can I show up for you? Is something I also say a lot of the time. When you ask that question, it's like, in order for them to answer it, they have to dispel their expectations that aren't serving anybody, because you are only you, you are only a peer supporter, and you're there. Oh my gosh. See, I love that you're real and raw, because Hank is having a little puppy dream right now. And I just have to
Oh,
honor that. You know, as Shonda
I
said,
thought I
with
heard him,
the
or his little
husband.
paws
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah. It's a good dream.
Oh,
It's a good, I think there's bunnies involved. But
oh my God, I love
yeah,
that.
it's just like,
Hank is, wait, what kind of dog is Hank again?
he's a mini Bernedoodle, and he's also
Oh,
human, like 100%. That's the one weird thing about raising a puppy in COVID, is I try to explain this to people, but like, he understands English. Like, because I started left his like training of like sit in like these weird things, because I talked to him and I said, oh, and this is kind of weird, but I always say, like, daddy doesn't like that. And he stops doing it, and he comes and lays at my feet. Like, it's like just weird things. It's like, are you hungry?
wow.
And he goes to his bowl. Like, it's very like, I don't know. I'm like, I could do a whole nother episode on the value of, I think it's very important, actually. I love that he did this, because having Hank, I actually got Hank. So I told you, when I went, my mom babysat me when I was suicidal, and we sort of, made decisions as a team. No shame. I definitely went on medicine at that time. I tried everything, and it saved my life. It was right for me
Mm,
in that moment. And it was something that I fought against, because I wanted to be this woke guy who could, you know, get out of any sort of chemical imbalance with thoughts. And I believe that's totally possible. But, in the crossroads of all the trauma that I was in, that was something that I did. But I also, I'm one of the few people, not just like, those of us that get dogs and then get them emotional support licenses to fly. I actually, like, with my psychologist, I had a psychologist, psychiatrist, and coach, decided to get Hank the month after that. And
mm,
there was something so cool. This bond that I have, it terrifies me, because, as you know, like, I'm doing all of this for the point where, I get to be a father. I mean, that's my goal. That's something that I just have always wanted and always known, and that I have, I definitely want to show up in a very specific way when I bring life up.
mm.
And the bond, and I know, and I don't want to get you going, of course, honoring your daily relationship and your grief process with your beautiful dog, but the connection, it just, we always had dogs, we always had pets. I mean, it was like a zoo, and my perfection complex kind of hated it. I kind of felt with my dad on the Portuguese. Like, I loved the animals, but I never had mine. And
Mm,
so it's like, I'm going through what my siblings went through, because they all actually had, like, it was their dog. Like,
mm,
they'd get it, but it was our family dog, but it was like my brother's dog. And my brother's dog, like, threw him with cancer just on the bed the whole time, just like, and I saw it, but I never understood it. But this is just like, it saved my life, that, like, the baby metaphor, that Hank didn't know better, and he had to be fed in the morning, and he had to go out. And I might not have been in a place for me, but having him, having his emotional support and unconditional love, and there's something about that, he bonded with me during a time where I was too tired to not be vulnerable, that
mm.
we have this, it is just beyond anything I ever expected with an animal. And it's like, I know this is becoming like an emotional support animal commercial in a way, but it's just, sometimes it's okay to go, hey, I'm, for our Drew fans out there, I am an Enneagram 2. I am a helper, and I am an achiever. And if you put anyone in need in front of me, it brings me back to life. It's what is the defibrillator? I mean, that is my
Yeah.
instant, especially somebody that, like, I've come to know or care about, which as you know, is a very quick threshold for me, you know, finding humanity in people and kind of caring about them right away. But it's just like this idea of it's okay, rather than just being like, I don't want to get a dog, because it's like admitting that I have to bring another living being into my life in order to sort of find some balance and make it not about me. But it's just like this really cool thing of like, you know, that baby metaphor coming to life of just like, there, I knew that I might not do it for me, but there was no way that I was going to not take this beautiful puppy outside,
Yeah.
like, and not live into the unconditional love. And I don't know if you've ever heard Shonda Rhimes talk about the buzz with her kids, with answering it's the is it the hum or the buzz? But you know, she had this moment where she was like, you know, succeeding and working, and you know, her kids would ask her to play with her, and no, honey, I can't, you know, right now. And she had to stop everything and just commit to every time her kids asked her to commit to play, that she said yes. And I have that.
Oh,
I watched that right before the dog, and so every time, so it's just so different. I don't get mad at him when he gets, you know, a little but he's a puppy, when he gets a little hyper, or and he's just so good by dog standards, but you know, he gets hyper, and it's like I click into that Shonda moment, and I'm like, hey, you're being invited to play by an
yeah.
innocent living creature, and you can choose not to play, but do not blame that. And it's like this final, like, you know, learning lesson for fatherhood. But actually, he makes me maybe not want to be a father, because when I think about not having him as a dog, I'm
Oh,
like, I'm like,
ooh.
I can't have a child out there like
Oh,
roaming free on streets with traffic and other people. Like, I'm like, oh my God. Like, I don't think I could have a part of me that's not like with me. At least he stays, you know, with me.
oh,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just, it's such an interesting experience. And it's, you know, it's a cool one, because, you know, sometimes when you're in that place of crisis, having someone talk back or try to fix or try to help, it's not the right fit for right now. You know, it's dabbling in unconditional love, having to, you know, start with an animal or whatever it is for you first. I have unconditional love for sunrises and sunsets, and as you know, that's guided a lot of my decisions. Like, it may not make sense to my accountant sometimes, but if I'm
Yeah.
going to be on Earth, there has to be moments like we had in Baja, where the sunrise and the sunset are actually a part of my priorities and are
Yeah. And
an
that
investment.
magic. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think us, and you know what? I think some of what, you know, we get from the animals in our lives are nudges from the universe. Like, hey, guess what, Addison? You've been working a lot. Like a little playtime is also good for
Mm-hmm.
the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget to eat. And don't, like, these are also little nudges for self care, right? And our own self
Yes. Yes.
appreciation. And we forget to play. And animals are such a powerful reminder of the power of play.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that too, because the reminders, like, you know, I said I get to be so fortunate as somebody who loves my job, and I know we'll plug tether, and this is tether adjacent, so like,
Well,
you know,
let's do, will
you
you
know,
dovetail into tether? Because I could talk
yes,
to you for
yeah,
like 17
I know,
hours.
yes,
And
yeah,
but yeah, well, dovetail this into like, how do we find tether,
yes,
and what does it look like to be a part of tether? So yeah, complete your thought, but I
yes.
wanted to have you go there anyway.
Well, yeah, and it goes in line. But I was just gonna say, even when you love your job, and I know you know this well too, that like, even if you love your job, staying sitting for 12 hours straight, even if you love what you're doing, you still need those nudges. Self care. Self care isn't like, doesn't go out the window when you find purpose. You know, it's even
Yeah.
more important because you actually want to be at the computer or having conversations. And it's like, so yes, when Hank like needs a walk, and I'm like, I don't have time for that. It's like, you need to stand up anyway. You need a walk. Like, it's a very cool reminder. Um,
Yeah. Can I just say one thing on that? One of
yeah.
the metrics I've talked to my community about this, so it may be a little bit of a repeat, but I have three metrics that I check in on now. One is mission, so the impact I'm having in the world. The other one is money. So, you know, I
Mm,
believe money follows mission. Money is not an obsession for me. And the third is energy, protecting my energy. and making sure that I'm constantly fueling my own energy so that I can serve in the powerful way and show up in the powerful way I want to. And that is part and parcel of what you're talking about as well.
Yeah. And there we go with the dovetail into, self-care and that self-awareness. And so we've built this app, which, I mean, really, I couldn't have spoken more about Tethr than being able to have the opportunity to go through the pillars of peer support, because at its heart, that is what it is. So Tethr is an app that it's not only for men. I like to say it shows up as a solution to the men's mental health epidemic, and it shows up in a way for men to have 24/7 access to support, because life is 24/7, as we know now. And it shows up in that way specifically for them in the way that research, we have the leading men's mental health doctors in the world that advise us at Heads Up Guys out of Canada. And they're a Movember funded organization. And we've also recently been working a lot with Andrew Renner, who wrote a book called Better Boys, Better Men, which I love. And then you have Cleo and her book
Cleo
Modern Manhood.
Stiller,
and it's like,
yeah.
Yes, Cleo's amazing. And they've all been a part of my education, because again, so much of my education, and I know you read an article that's going to come into the world very soon that I've been writing, but my education is not bullet points on a normal resume. It's very experiential, and it's getting to have conversations like this. And that's what we're bringing to men, because the research actually shows that that's how men respond, and that's how men will be more likely to engage in mental fitness, mental health. And just like, if we, we can do as many suicide awareness commercials as we want, but if men are not responding to that, if that's not the way that men respond, then let's create something that's for men in the way that they respond, And it's like, we could go into a whole nother thing on how cancel culture is for those that believe in cancel culture. It's not actually for the people you're trying to cancel, because those people don't believe in being canceled, and that's not how they show up. So if you want to educate them and teach them something and allow them to resurface, it's, you have to speak in a way that they understand. And I know as a coach, all about that as well. But that's where Tethr really comes in, is it's just like I said from the beginning, Matt and I going to the highest level of peer support, but we're in the community. I mean, if you're on there, I'm responding to what you're saying. I'm a part of it. We hold digital events. It's become this whole culture, really, and it's hard to explain, but it's completely free and it's on the App Store. And at its basis, it's a safe space where men can show up to support and be supported. And I don't want to underestimate the level of positive celebration that happens in there. It is not a crisis resource. It's not something where you go, oh, I heard about Tethr, from my husband. If he ever gets to a place where he seems off mentally, I'm going to tell him about Tethr. Tethr, to bring this full circle to my story, the reason I tell what I tell at the beginning of what I went through is because my mission, which you've helped me identify in Baja, Shelley, my mission is to remind people that you get to build a support system before a life event deems it necessary. That has to be there. If you're trying to full-time be in recovery, full-time in survival mode, full-time grieving, and building a community of conscious, compassionate, buddies, I mean, no way.
It's too late.
No way. It's
absolutely.
You want to be utilizing the community at that point. You want to be engaging in your safe spaces at that point. You can't start building at crisis. And I'm not saying that no one is too far gone. No, before, during, and after, we're there for you. So, you still come. We're not a crisis resources, but as you are going through something, you definitely can start to build that community at any point. But for those men that, say, well, I'm pretty good, I'm okay, great, come and practice and normalize the conversation around that now. Get in the arena. We both love Brene Brown, and that's, I love to say this, but, it's the guy that's covered in dust in the arena. We've built an arena for men to come and literally practice courage, show up for each other, and we're getting to this place where we're understanding how men learn and how they will respond. And so this month we launched, you probably saw some of this, but our Tethr pods, which is where you're actually put in a pod with 5 other men. And we're doing an accountability cohort right now. So each pod has 5, and then the cohort is like everybody. So you can kind of think of it like a mental health, like fantasy football league, where there's
Yeah.
all these pods, right? And so they're learning experientially in a group, well, the behavior, each taking turns of that balance and that boundary driven balance of supporting each other, but also learning together and making sense of things. And they're doing it. And I designed it with a coach, and Chris Wilson is his name, and he's an excellent men's coach. And it's something that we found that's just really scalable, and it's exactly what men are saying they want and what the research shows how they will show up. So it's like if we can get, just start to close those gaps of the statistics that I talked about, where,
Yeah.
just, I mean, 70% of 75% of suicides being male, in some places 80 now. And these are pre-pandemic statistics. We all
Mm.
know that like Tether was built as a solution to isolation and loneliness, and as a way for people to build really essentially a team for life before the pandemic. So we are multiplied by 100 now, a year and a half into this thing. And whatever it is that you're going through, I mean, it is just a confusing time, politically, consciously, career wise. There's so many guys that show up there in transition, and that's why I loved being down in Baja and learning
Yeah.
that. But it's there for wherever you at, and you're the expert of your experience. And it's not like, oh well, I don't want to go on there. We have had guys that convert after 6 months. Come and see, because the safe space, you see it visibly through the main threads. And it's perfectly normal and perfectly okay to come at your comfort level and figure out what your barrier to entry is. That's the excitement of my job. What gets in your way? Can we start with one word? Can we start with just championing other men? Can we start with just being a part of an environment that is normalizing the conversation? So experientially, when you all of a sudden one day, I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to share, or I wanted to join one of the community events, or I wanted to, do a Tales That Tether and share my story. It's not really that out of nowhere. You've
Yeah.
experientially started being a part of this safe space for a while, and you see how the culture has maintained itself. And that's the biggest thing I got to say. I mean, I cannot believe the culture that these 3,000 men that we already have created and maintained. I mean, like, little to no reports in the entire time. And this is all men, Shelley. I mean, this is anybody who identifies as a male. This is not this is what true masculinity, what modern
Mm.
masculinity is,
Yes.
for the
Hell
male
yes.
experience. I
Yes.
don't even say, we don't say the anything that starts with a T about masculinity, because we don't even want to associate a poisonous term with
Yeah.
masculinity
Yeah. I
anymore. It's
love
just
it.
like, let's step into it. And actually, for anyone questioning this, guys, the recent study, 93% of men don't identify with masculinity the way it's portrayed
Mm.
publicly. 93%. So that's basically all of us. Like, you know what I mean? It just like it just makes sense to sort of start to build these connections and be a part of something. And it's really, we've used this word a bunch, but it's like, it has taught me, after so much heartache and heartbreak, that magic exists. And this whole year has been that for me. It's just like, fuck, magic exists. And I know that I could give you, 10 personal examples and 100 million professional examples that I've gotten to witness this year. And that's the coolest thing about my job, is getting to see where men sort of come into this, and then how it impacts their life on a daily basis, and to be getting these emails. And like, I did TMZ on New Year's Eve. I was lucky enough to get to go on. And if you told me that I was going to, like, from TMZ, like, get so much response from men across, America and the world, saying that, like, when you shared your story, it made me want to come and check it out. And I was just like, whoa, like, I mean, I just didn't, like, and that's from, I was literally, I mean, put between Justin Bieber and a
Yeah.
parking lot fight. I was right in the middle there, and it was like, I don't know why I'm closing New Year's Eve, but it's like, this is where I'm meant to be right now, between Justin
Yeah.
Bieber and a parking lot fight, which was two men. And Justin Bieber, who has now started to, he's Canadian, and I'm never gonna diss my bro, but he's now started to talk about his mental health more publicly, and he has been, believe it or not, very courageous in allowing his mental health journey to be so public during the most formative years of his life,
Mm.
And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, you know what? I do kind of fit in right here on TMZ. I do like this. This is where it's going. I mean, TMZ is covering it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
It's in that
thank
means
God
it's
we're here.
mainstream, right? That's
We're
exactly
arriving. Yeah,
it.
we're arriving.
Oh, that's a
Awesome.
beautiful place to end as much as I don't want to end this
Hmm.
conversation. I just want to acknowledge you, and Matt is your co-founder, right? You
Yes,
and
yes.
Matt and the work that you're doing, your entire team for being on this mission. You know, I'm purpose driven, and you know, mental health is one of the things that keeps me going. Normalizing this conversation for every human, let alone for, men who have been taught to, that traditional bullshit masculinity story is so incredibly necessary. And what you're describing and what you're experiencing, people's reaction to you telling your story and being willing to be vulnerable, is exactly the feedback I've gotten from the book. It's like, thank
Hmm.
you. Thank you for not trying to polish this. Thank you for
And
not
doing it in your
trying to,
tone. Yes.
yeah, and doing it very authentically and including humor, but showing us like the fucking mess of it all and
Hmm.
saying that's okay, because that's where real conversations start and that's where real community gets built. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shelley. It's an honor, and I look forward to talking to you as much as possible. You know,
Oh,
it
well,
always
and
was.
the good thing is we're both in LA now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm going to definitely see you. But before we go, where can people dig a little bit deeper? Where can they find you and where can they find Tether most importantly?
Absolutely. And there's so much content now. We've really been building over the last few months on all these different topics. But Tether, TETHR, it is now available in the iOS and the Google Play Store. So
Yay.
everybody, which is something for a small startup, is a big thing that we got there. So we're there. For literally, we can say we show up to all guys now, which is amazing. And then TETHR, tether.men is the website. And I just want to say, as like head of brand and impact, I take that very seriously. And if we cannot create something of value for the guys when it comes to our content and it comes to what we put out there, we consciously curate it. An example of that will be like, podcasts like this, where we'll put those in the app and like, but it's consciously curated and it's there for you and it's not clickbait. There's not a dollar yet of any sort of external advertising or anything like that, but it's really there for you to dig a little deeper. And again, if that's a barrier to entry, that's all there for you to kind of learn experientially and start your journey. And if starting your journey, if starting to honor your journey sounds, a little bit like too much for anybody listening, or you think, oh, my husband won't go for this. If you're a wife listening or a friend or, whatever it is, which is a very big conversion point for us as
Yeah.
women telling their husbands, oh, my husband needs tether. But if you, I would say if anybody kind of say, oh, that feels like a lot, you've already started. You've already
Mm,
started honoring it. It's just stepping into it. And I do have to say before we sign off, Shelley, a lot of people talk the talk, but you walk the walk. And I really
mm,
feel so privileged to know you. And just as another conscious creator, if you guys dig a little deeper, Shelley does donate, as you know, to a mental health organization from her proceeds. And yeah, as a conscious connector, that's so important to me. And I really do look up to you a lot. And I
mm.
thank you for the
Thank
opportunity,
you. This
Shelley.
is
This has
incredible.
been a great conversation.
It is not the last conversation you and I are going to have. It is
We'll be back.
only the beginning. And your Instagram, is it at Tether for Men?
Yes, at Tether for Men. So
Okay,
TETHR
perfect.
for men. Mm-hmm.
And you do so much cool stuff. I just have to plug at Addison Brasil. We'll put all this in the show notes, but I just love following you as well. I follow both you and Tether, and it's good fun. Like what you put out in the world is so real and so relatable and really fucking funny. So, by the way, speaking of funny, for those of you who are just listening to us and not actually seeing us, what's behind Addison right now is a tagline. And by the way, I didn't even know this was your Tether tagline. It's "We fuck with feelings." And I have been staring at it this whole time going, oh my God, I wish I wrote that. That is so incredible. We fuck
Thank
with
you.
feelings.
Coming from you, that means a lot.
Brilliant.
CMO. CFO, yeah.
Totally.
No, yeah.
It's brilliant.
Just fuck with the feelings, not the thoughts around it. Really quickly, that's what that is. So just, go
Oh
into the
my God.
experience, stay on the feelings. And I'm feeling so grateful. So I'm gonna sit with that today. Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, as am I, and I'm like smiling from ear to ear. So thank you, my friend. I love you, and I can't wait to see you on your rooftop for a little sunset vino.
Yes.
All right, ciao, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye. Hey, Rebel. Thanks for listening. If you were inspired by what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review so our fellow Rebel Souls can find us. We have big work to do together. And if you want to dive deeper, head on over to my website at soulbatical.com and follow me at Soulbatical on Instagram. Until next time, stay bold, brave, and badass, and never stop asking, what am I rebelling for?